welcome to the class. And today we are going to start with advanced search operators. And we would be learning things which perhaps, or I would say more than likely, you probably never looked at the search from this point of view. We are going to get introduced to what the advanced operators are that we are going to use, and mostly these are the ones that you're looking at right now that we use more often, or you could say that these are most uh, could say that most prevalent or most applied. In addition to these, there could be few more which are actually the ones that I have just marked with the green fonts right here. And again, there's additional operators that I will see if I can find them, which are not listed here. And I see that it's missing a few. But the important ones, the ones that we will focus on and get our conceptual understanding of how they apply on the web pages, because after all, everything that is queried is focused on looking up information within the individual web pages that are collected and indexed, and therefore creating a relationship on what type of information is queried is absolutely most important. So to begin with, let's just look at this slide. And I was giving a lecture earlier, and people were a little bit concerned about the pace at which I was delivering my lecture, because apparently it was a bit too fast for them. So I will just sort of slow down my pace a little today. And if you feel that it is lethargic or just too slow for you, and then you can just ask me to increase, just as you do in the volume. You can just ask me to increase, the rate at which I'm delivering the lecture just by listening at it. Now, we have actually in this slide divided or categorized the type of operators with the red fonts that most likely you could say that it could be considered a sort of a category or a title of what falls under it. So the ones in the red font, we are going to identify with whatever is mentioned under it. Uh, One of the headings says is snippets. Do you know what snippet is? First of all, just to get the basic cleared up. We've discussed snippets at length, probably in our early lectures. What snippet is a combination of three sets of information that comes up when we are doing our search, and that snippet is obviously just the easiest way is if I do AIRS association, or maybe just search engine. The page that gets returned, the entire page, as you can see, of the search, all these elements that you're looking at are named differently depending on what set of box is presented, and this organization keeps changing. Occasionally we see that Google is experimenting with it, and you don't get to see the consistency in which the presentation is made, and the setting of how the layout is keeps changing. So for now, you can see that this is the latest outcome of the search result page, and this is the first page we are looking at right here, the first page. And then you've got all these pages. Individual page we call SERPs. So the entire page, the first page is abbreviation is SERPs, but it stands for search engine result pages. Now, a set of three different informations laid out in a manner that is differentiated by its style of presentation, has got a name given to it. For example, the set of three elements that you see, you could on the top see a link, which we call a URL. URL and link are the same, but technically they're different. But because we are not getting too deep in technicality, you can change it interchange. You can use it interchangeably. So, from the learning point of view, links and URL would be the same thing. The heading or the title of the three elements, or what makes the three elements, is the ones in the fonts, as you can see, which is more or less hyperlinked. If you click on it, it takes you to the page or the landing page, and then everything else that is of descriptive nature gives further information, like few lines under it, would be another format. Now, because these are three elements, we call the one at the bottom, these lines, as description. This part is title. The one on top is the URL or the link. Yeah, link address, you can call it also. But just so that you know that there are different ways in which the snippets appear, and we just added these slides, and this came up after Google made some changes recently. And I will just quickly show you how the layout has changed, or how individual snippets comes in varied forms and presentations. So let's just get an overview of what appears in the SERPs, or what you can expect from recent changes, so that at least we know what we are talking about when we start to correlate that eventually with the operators. So one of the things that you will notice is, while you're typing, you get these type of boxes. This is another way of how the search is now started to present its its pages, or that's the parts of SERP which we cannot call snippets basically, but these are boxes of information, and each box will be named differently, as you will see in the next slide. You would find something that comes as scholarly articles, and this is based on how the search is interpreting the query that you're typing, or while you're typing. As I mentioned, that there are different types or base major categories of search queries that the search engine identifies with the user. And if you recall, it was one of them was navigational, there was a transactional, informational, and so on. So while you're typing, it makes its own decisions, sends the request in a manner that says that because you have used these two words, it is more likely posing a question, or it is research papers. So how it decides that, what is the algorithms that make that decision, we don't want to know at this point. What we'd like to learn, however, is that we should be aware of the behavior when we are typing something. We are actually at the same time informing the search to be ready, or setting those triggers which will impact the way the search is going to return the results. Then we've got another way, or another form, that you can see that these are featured snippets, which means that some of the boxes would appear with the images in relationship to a definition. You would find a definition coming up in case you, again, if you're using two words internet research, because why it's missing certain context, or maybe the information is incomplete, or maybe these two words together are used frequently for finding what internet research is. So this is the reason you will get Wikipedia coming up, or the first set of results would show up with Wikipedia information and scholarly articles. Then you got specialized blocks. These are video blocks, and they appear in relationship to your and the okay. First of all, it sometimes um, poses a question: is why are we seeing what we are seeing, when we do use certain type of search phrases, and when you're using some other ones, the same type of information disappears or is just not there at all. So if you're really good at doing search, you would actually craft your query in such a way that it brings the kind of information all in one SERP, so that you have that variation of sources which are not tied up necessarily to the textual part of search, but includes multimedia files as well. So you would see when you're doing internet search a video box. This information is coming from YouTube. It is not coming from the textual search or content pages directly, but rather from the videos that are more popular in relation to these two words, and based on the decision that search thinks those two words should also give you information about the video, so you will have these showing up. And then the reference is given, also the source where you can actually look when the video was uploaded. Then we have done this. People also ask, this part we have covered. Related searches. Related searches is suggestions or something that usually appears at the very bottom of your search pages. Then you've got images coming up as well. You can report images for the reason that if they are copied or copyright infringement is happening, you can actually click on this right here. It wasn't there before, but in the new format they have report images written in small fonts at the corner. Then these are the different ways in which the search results may be presented. So before, we used to teach that there's the maximum number of lines that are available in the description part are so many, or there was some sort of a structure that was pretty much standard in the way the snippets or the search results used to get returned. So the snippet in this case are of these different kinds, where you could see that in the first one, again, coming back to what snippet is, that's where we started from. So you got the URL or the address of the link, and then you got the title and the description. But under that, you could see that there is more information which is bringing the type of you could say the links that defines or backs up whatever is coming in the snippet on the top. The three elements together inform the search that they should provide additional information. Why? Because usually when people click on this link, they end up not only on the home page, but there is a relationship now built automatically through machine learning. And as I mentioned, and as I keep saying, collective wisdom of the search engine algorithms, they make a relationship through a process of ontology that says that anyone going on this page also clicked on these navigation buttons at the top, which is where your heading or the logo is sitting on the individual web page of a home page particularly. So those main navigations or top buttons are the ones that are mentioned under it. Then you've got another version of how it appears. You could see that there were three lines of description in the first one. Second one, you've got two lines. And then you've got another layout format, which is really showing brief information, basically links of the top, on the top, or the home page links, as you can read certifications, CIRS certification benefits, about education. So these are all related to education and certification. and these are not pulled from the top links like certification, I'm sorry, from the link like about. It has got other internal links that identifies if you, based on the words you have typed. So supposing if I've typed internet's research certifications, then I would most likely get these buttons that are related to certification. The third format that you can see is right here. It has got two lines. The information at the bottom has a date in it, and then it has the link that says business of online research. Now these type of information are important even before you decide to click on any of these SERP page snippets. You can make your decision ahead of time. And if you are really proficient in your search, you've been doing it over and over, you know that certain links, even though they may have the keywords as mentioned, like research professionals, internet, as an example in three, yet you want to make sure that you are taken to the right piece of information or right source where you can obtain the information. You can make your decision at that point, so not to waste time and to avoid that sort of a click. For instance, when I'm reading something that says business of online research, and for instance the date is here, I know that this is going to take me to a third party platform, and I can see from the link it is a third party platform, a piece of information that is either borrowed or or something which is not what you require. Like business of online research is a webinar event. Eventbrite is an event site, so I may not be interested in clicking on this because I need information not about when the event is happening, or if there is an event that I don't really necessarily want to go to. I want the main website to be queried. So I'll make a decision at that point. I will not click on this. And this is the way you can read this is something that we are learning as a way of figuring out whether or not you should be able to, or you should click those snippets, making decision ahead of time, and a way of how to read the SERP pages. So again, continuing with the previous examples and different sets of how the snippets are designed, we are going to see some more variations. These are not numbered, but ideally, I would say that this is a continuation after three. These could be four, five, six, seven, eight, and nine. So you can imagine that it is a continuation from the previous slide. So another one says that this document is a PDF, so it might be some sort of research paper or some information which may be important because it is put inside of a PDF. PDF are usually more than a few pages, or usually longer than few, unless they're brochures or something of that sort. But because we know that if we have to click on something that has a PDF, then we have to go deeper into reading. And if we have enough time, we feel that we have to open it based on the subject or the title. We may want to click on it, or we may decide to ignore and just move on to the next snippet. This one, again, these results are coming from just two keywords. So I'm going to emphasize that we are not changing keywords here. We are focused on internet research, internet researchers, or something to do with a few keywords alone, which are consistent so that we can compare the results of coming from the same type of query. Now, in the in this one, you would find something, a piece of information that would be helpful. If I have to ask you, any one of you, to make a decision on, clicking this second one where I've put my cursor, that says universalclass.com, what could be the reason that you would not want to click on this? As a question, I'm just creating a question on my own just to see if you can make a decision based on what your need is. So, what would be that decision before you click on it to see whether or not this link is useful, whether or not this navigation or for you to click on it is going to be productive? So how would you imagine or interpret this link or this snippet altogether? What can we learn from here? One thing is that the domain itself is saying universalclass.com. So it is obviously somewhere something to do with teaching or instructions or an institution, a training center. Second is that you can see in the top. Now this is just looking at the link or the address. Then we know that it is going to a subdirectory which says that the information or eventually where you're going to land would be the piece of web page that somehow has in its first folder mentioned or defined as an article. In the second folder, which is a subfolder that comes after the, you can see that there is a little bit of a sign of um, an arrow, a little arrow, which you can interpret as a backslash if you had to imagine this to be a long URL. So universalclass.com backslash article would mean that the main directory or the folder this where this information is going to be placed would have a name called article, so you know it is coming from an article. And then backslash again replacing this little arrow means another subfolder of the folder articles that is talking about writing, or maybe this article is about writing something. And then you have the rest of it, which is probably the last backslash before the link address ends, is where the title of that page might be. And you could see that with these little dots, it means that unless you click on it or you do something like, I can't do it here because it's static image, it would give you the title of the page. So that title, which is starting after the last arrow or the last backslash, is what will define the information um, or the heading of that information that would be on that page. Second thing is that the main heading or the title means that it could be the main title, which is what is identified with the rest of the text that you can expect on that web page. So what the title would say is how to use internet search engines for research. If this is something that you were looking for, then of course you can make a decision at this point and know that it is coming from a source which you may consider more relevant or less relevant or reliable or less reliable. So, for example, if this link had a dot and the extension instead of .com would be edu or .gov, you would know that it is coming from a better or a higher quality of source. Apparently, this is a decision again based on how much of emphasis you want to pay uh, to the to the source or the authentication or credibility of that source. Then rest of the text would give you the story, a little bit of it, not the entire extract. For instance, here the search engine did few things. One is that it decided to only extract 2 lines of information. Why not 3? Why not 4? Because there are instances where the search might have just pulled 4 lines of information. That makes it even more relevant and for the researcher to get a better sense of what the whole page would be about. However, let's just work with this 2 lines, and you could see that it is talking about something for which you have to see if it is going to teach you something, it is piece of research, or it is an article that is purely teaching you how to write technical papers. So based on what your objective of search is, you may want to interpret, read each one of these different 3 elements to get a sense of where it's going to take you. In the next one, you could see again that it says web search jobs. So it is obviously a job search website. Clickworkers.com. It is again, it is very sort of, it makes more sense and logically you can understand that it could be something to do with the job site and so on. So you can continue. Here it says .edu in the link. So a link gives you a lot of information as well. Then everything else you can see these different variations. Now I'm not going to go through each one of them here, and but the last one you can see has something different in it. One of the things you will notice is that the URL starts with my.freelanceu.com. So when you have something like this in the link, or the URL says that the domain is actually starting with something which is not standard, or not the way you name your domain names, yet you find additional wordings or some sort of characters or naming before the main website name, as I can imagine and I can visualize that it may be a website called freelanceu.com, but then even before that domain name starts, I see that there is a dot, uh, uh, and uh, and it has the word my in it. So what it is saying is, and another thing, while we're talking about my right here, and before I explain what this means, um, these are the conventions in which you split the domain into subdomains, which means if it is a fake website or something that is deceptive, for which you have certain namings that is falling after, for instance, after freelanceu.com, there is a dot, and then you have my written at the end of the link, or the domain rather. It means that it may be a fake website. So convention is that if you have to split it into a subdomain, which is perfectly legitimate to do, like Yahoo, for instance, if you click on mail, or if you are looking at your emails inside of inbox at the top, you would see that the URL will say mail.yahoo.com. Similarly, if you are clicking on a finance section of a big website like Yahoo, it may have created a subdomain for that set of information that is separated, or specialized information that has forced the main domain to split it into a subdomain. You would see that it would say, the link would say finance.yahoo.com. It will never say yahoo.com.finance or yahoo.finance.com. That is the wrong convention, wrong way, which means a domain has been registered, which is legitimate to do, with the dots in between that sort of puts those subdomain naming at towards the end of that domain name, and therefore makes it deceptive, to give the notion that it is the same website coming from yahoo.com, which may be from which is not really the subdomain. You would have to make that decision at the time when you're looking at the snippet, or even when you're getting emails in your inboxes. You may want to ensure that the source from where it is coming, or if there is something called phishing, where you have to click on a link for you to go to another, I guess, web page, which gives a notion that it is coming from an authentic source like PayPal or some name of a bank, and the layout would be exactly the same. The color, fonts, and the look of it would make you feel that you are on the right website, just because you have clicked on something that sort of gave you the notion that it is taking you to the right side. So all checks are there in your mind that you are doing the right thing. But at the last minute, or the point where you actually reach that web page, just look at the address bar and find out if the subdomain naming convention is presented properly in the same manner as is supposed to be in a standardized format of creating subdomains. And as I mentioned, my.freelanceu.com, in my opinion, is a legitimate domain, a subdomain, or a split of the main domain, and therefore I wouldn't have to question it. So this is another way of looking at how the domain naming has to be searched and authenticated. Second thing is, in this one you can see that there is a rating 4.5 right here. So whenever you see these ratings, you would have to also know that this piece of information is a set of indicator, and not in a not to be imagined in the sense of how this snippet is laid out, but from the generic perspective, in general, you can see the rating part is only mentioned in the snippet if that website is got a link with the Facebook that allows for the public to give rating to it, or if there is a review of some sort on this page, or if it is a service website that is delivering online services, which in turn gets rated by the end consumers or customers. The only thing with the stars present is that it gives you an additional sort of set of information for which you may want to decide if you feel that this is the type of information that you want, or wherever you're heading is going to be a site that is either a service site for sure, or it is a valuation or connectivity with the social media account that is giving rating or a public opinion. Even the public review website or consumer review website that may have review on this domain may also be something that you may look forward to be seeing if you click on the links like this one. Other than that, I don't think, okay, the okay, so we've got more versions of different ways in which these snippets are showing. Now, this is coming as a new format for us. It is not something that was there from before. Like last year, in 2019, for a fact, these different variants weren't actually part of your SERPs. And I think it happened somewhere in May, April or May of this year, and then they kept on changing it and experimenting with it. So this is the result of how this is it is showing these days. And what we are learning is how to interpret the snippets of different sorts. Now continuing with the same uh, different ones that we want to also look up is one, two, three, four more. This one, for instance, is giving you information about the author or the co-authors of some sort of publication. So in case if you overlooked the link, because links may not sometimes say books, in this case it is talking about books, and eventually you could see it's coming from a subdomain of Google, and this is an authentic source. Just because the convention in which this link is written is correct, it is a subdomain, and definitely from Google, and it is taking you to a book section. So you can see that when something like this comes up, you can make out if it is giving you information about the author, like at the bottom right here. This part is separate. What never used to be part of the snippet is now added. So they've improved these snippets, but when we are going to do advanced search and use advanced search operators, we will be only querying or finding out about the information that is embedded inside of the link, or the title part at the top, or the description part. So we will only be talking about or making relationship of these sources of information from web pages in reference to the advanced search operators with three elements only, and nothing that is probably which is what we are talking about. This part at the bottom is not something we'll be querying, and we don't have specific operators to do a query that is specific to these elements, which keeps popping up off and on. They are not consistent. These are just variations. So you could see Alan Taylor is the name of the author, James Robert Parrish, and then 2010 computers. When you have a format like this, you are definitely going to see a book somewhere that is on a web portal or a web page talks is talking about the book and the author. So even if this link at the top doesn't say or talk about books, when you find something while you're reading these snippets, that is mentioning this kind of statement or the sequence in which, or similar type of information right here at the bottom, it is taking you to the book or research papers, which is very specific to the authors. So if you click on any one of these at the bottom, you would find that these sometimes are hyperlinks and sometimes they're not. So if they're hyperlinks, they're genuine. If they are static links, which are not clickable, then you know that this could be part of the description somewhat, or it may not be, um, the it may not be something that you would say that the search engine has captured separately as a source. Rather, it could be part of the description if these are static. Then you've got this one, which is coming from a news agency or something that is tied up to a news part or news section. If you're using Google, it could be part of the link that takes you to the news section, which is at the top, or it could be a source of an article that is published somewhere or in any kind of magazine. Just because you are looking at a date right here, 22 hours ago, that means it is a story of some sort or a news, or that source really belongs to a news agency. So PR news obviously is very evident that the link itself is telling you it is a news source, but there could be others which may have a name that won't define or identify it with a news agency. However, you can look at this part that is giving you not only these these type of I guess wordings, or you can also see that occasionally you would also find that there are actual dates mentioned here, like July 20th, whatever the convention in which they've put it would be captured. So whenever you see anything to do with dates or the timelines, you know it is a news source. So if you're looking for articles, not the news part, you don't have to click on this. So on and so forth. Like now, in these ones, the one on the top where I'm pointing you to the description side, right here, you could see that these are 3 lines of information, and at the bottom, you could see this link or this snippet has 4 lines of information. Now, why it is 3 lines and 4 lines is a complex kind of understanding, which I would think, and I'd attempt to give you some sort of a reason for it. But obviously, it is something that you'll have to visualize more. Don't have actual example of it. First of all, understand that these 3 lines or whatever is in the description part is coming from the deeper text or the the detailed text that is there on those web pages. So it could be number of lines, or it could be those words which you have actually searched for that are highlighted and emphasized as internet search right here, association specialist, assuming that these were the words that needs to be highlighted. And supposing that these words did not get captured in one instance of where the search algorithms or search spiders, crawlers are collecting that description part which shows those words in first few lines, and they are a bunch of lines which do have those wordings inside of the paras or the deeper layers of sub paragraph and subheadings, but they are not like consistently coming in few lines or presenting themselves in the first few lines. It would have to capture the other lines as well and join it together to give it a better sense, or linguistically make it readable, that would actually give it some sort of sense that it is explaining what the page is about, yet it is able to highlight those words in there. So it may decide to capture more than a few lines, and when it is doing that, in order for it to display those words in there that you have actually put in your search, it may choose to pick more than a few lines, and therefore you could see that there are 4 lines of description presented in this one. So no big deal. Just so that you have an understanding of why certain snippets are different and what they mean and how to read them. That is the intention. And just getting a general information of why it is obviously something that will help you to remember the logic behind it. Anything else that we want to finish up on the search? Let's see, scholarly journals. There is more variations right here, but I have to give you another set of presentation uh, document, the one that I sent you before, the PDF, that would have the number of pages that you're looking at right now. That numbering may change because I've decided to add few extra slides and also to remove certain others. While I was giving you these lectures, I noticed that some of the slides I felt weren't there. I have now, pulled it from some other webinars and other lectures just because they are more informative and they could help you um, and give you better understanding. So I'm going to add those. So the reshuffling or the page numbering would change, and I would rather do it after I get done with module 2. um, and in the meantime, while we are going through these slides, I'm also preparing a document similar to the one I sent you before on basic search queries. If you remember the one in the red color, it had a title, I think, Basic Search Queries, Notations and Symbols, something similar to that on advanced search. It's being prepared right now. So along the way, if I get that done, I will just send it to you. However, the PDF of these slides, uh, which I mentioned I changed, I have to send it to you ahead of time because I think you would want to refer to them later on. So I'll give it my very best to have all that ready for you when we start on Monday next week. Okay. For now, we would just not have to do any more examples, I don't see. But even before we go to the break, let's see if we can just conclude this part. While we have done so many variations of what snippets may look like, there are few more that are left out. Might as well do that. So this one is talking about scholarly journals and archives, as you can see right here. This one is another one that is talking about Emerald Publishing, just 2 lines. So this is just a comparison. It is the same source, the same set of information, but it is presented differently because search may have captured. Um, by the way, did you know that the algorithms are not uniform when the search is running? It's or sending out its crawlers and robots, while it is bringing those pages back and it's stripping it and then reconstructing it so that it is indexed in a certain way. At that point, there are several algorithms that are actually working simultaneously, and they are all of them are meant to be applied in different ways to uh, to capture certain important aspect of that information, and even for it to put it in the index, or before it is putting into its index, all these different algorithms would select how it eventually is going to present those back to the user when the query is delivered or served. So in this case, 1 and 2, you could see there are 2 algorithms working. One is showing you this set of information based on the same source, which is emerald.com, except that Emerald Group Publishing is also related to, or is one of the websites that is connected with emerald.com, because emerald.com is a group, and these two are interconnected, and the other algorithm has picked up a source which is bringing same set of information or same set of uh, search research papers, but it is showing you as if it is coming from two different sources. So if you click on them, you would find exactly the same information pages as are indicated in the first one, and it would be similar to the second one. So these are also scholarly journal archives, and this itself is also taking you to scholarly journal archives. So not to get confused, but to understand that this might be a possibility as well, even though the direction in which it is going to take you would be the same. Another example of missing text, when you find that certain words or certain combination of words are not a part of the link at the top, or let's suppose even if they're not discovered elsewhere, like in the description part, or let's you suppose the worst scenario that you find a snippet that is returning pages, or the or something that has a title which is missing your keywords. It doesn't mean that they don't exist on that website. So keep that in mind. When the search is returning those snippet, it is not guaranteeing that the words you have put in your search are necessarily going to be highlighted or emphasized in any part of these three elements. And on the other hand, it also means that unless you click on it, or if you click on it, it is a surety that those words would be present in that textual content of that web page where it's taking you. So, not to think or not to make a decision hastily by ignoring certain links which may have incomplete information, or is missing those, or not highlighting those emphasized keywords you're searching for in your snippets. So as an example, let's suppose in the link at the top you see that internet research, it's starting to form, and after that there is dots and not the entire URL showing up. Why is that? Is because it may have the rest of the information, but because there is a limitation or embargo, or there is a wisdom in which the link itself may not be um, uh, or maybe rather long enough that it would not fit into the space that the search snippet is being allocated for writing the URL part, or presenting that URL part. So when that happens, you would find these dots. On the other hand, you also notice certain piece of information like right here is missing. It's not because the search didn't want to present it, but because it did pull that information, it is in the index, except that it is not allowing, or the other algorithm is restricting it from presenting it in the snippet for different reasons. So one algorithm has collected that information and made sure that you get to see part of the description, while the rest of it may be missing, and it is denoted by these dots. Same way, on the link at the top, you may find something that is giving you rest of the or the end part of your URL, which in this case shows business ideas, but the middle part is missing. That's because the middle part may be too long, whereas the business ideas can be shorter, and therefore it can be shown, and the search thinks that you would rather just giving you dots all the way for unknown. At least it is able to put into the slot or the limited space it has, the number of words that it can manage or allow for it to be presented. So these are some of the variations, but the important concept you have to understand and keep it in mind is not to think that those words are not there, and if those emphasized words are not appearing in any of these elements, or is missing altogether, it does not mean that they don't exist, or they are not going to be showing on the page if you click on it. So this should not be the criteria. This missing information can be revealed, it can be understood at the time when while you are doing your search. Just go on it, do a right click and find out what the link is like, because it's going to reveal the link. Not the description, but the link itself does get revealed if you go right click and click on the properties. Then we with this we don't have to do any time these tools that we have. This is so basic and so easy for you to look at and understand with the hands on attempts of how to use them would give you a better sense of why they're used. And I'm sure you must have used it for date ranges. You have date ranges, you've got what else you've got? You've got settings, languages. We don't. It is not a basic lecture. It is not where we are teaching how to do basic or very how to use tools in your search, because they are very much descriptive of what they are able to do for you. So I'm not going to go through each one of them, and we don't have a detailed description of how they work because we think that it may not be as important. It is just for users convenience and for them to figure out, and there's plenty of literature and description that you can find on these. So, what I would not miss out on, and something I consider very important, are some of these elements that would be very useful when you're doing search, or at least for you to understand why they are there. For some of the results that you are looking at, you would find an arrow that is pointing down, and it says all results and verbatim. Verbatim is something that tells the search, and it is not there all the time. It just depends. Like I said, the search engine results pages may choose on certain type of snippets to contain the option of verbatim. Some of the tools may also have verbatim and all results. Now, what is important is for you to know that even whenever you find or come across these terms, you know how to use them and in what type of instances, or what could be the utilization of this to get better results. So all results and verbatim usually pops up. Occasionally, it doesn't even show up, depending on which part of the world you're doing your search. I know that in certain European countries, even in UK, if you're doing your search, this option doesn't show up, but it does appear when you're doing it in US. Occasionally, search engine does that just for experimentation basis, or for just checking out the utility of how they are being used. Now, in this case, when you have an arrow pointing down within the tool section that gives you an option between selecting all results and verbatim, know that all results means that the search would turn around the search pages or result pages, which goes beyond just the actual naming of the terms that you are using, or the literal meaning that you have in there may not be sufficient for the search to feel satisfied. When I say search, I'm talking about the search engine side. So the search, thinking of, or just for the sake of explanation, I would think of it as a person. I will refer it as a person. So when I say search, means that entity or that being or that person would decide whether or not to give you the search result based on the literal sense in which those words are used, without giving it options of finding its variants or attaching it with any other words, or to give it a different sense, or for whatever reasons it may think that there is an implied possibility of assuming certain type of indicators that gives that search context with relation to location, or whichever, depending on the words you have used. So that opens up different variations, and therefore you call it all results. And all results also includes multimedia. It includes anything that or type of file, everything included. But in verbatim, it means that unless something or that source or that page has got only two words intact in the same sense, and they are given a literal meaning or assumed to have a literal meaning for the search to bring the results back in the explicit sense in which you have put the query, not the implied sense which is given to the query by the search, then you would restrict that and to a verbatim mode, and you would select the verbatim mode as a strict query that would deliver exactly what you have termed or you have put in your search as a phrase or as a few words. Search settings we don't have to worry about. Now, another concept is cached and similar, which is very common. We will continue with these two. And with first of all, getting some, I have to ask few questions just to get an understanding whether or not you know what caching technology is or what it means when we say cache or cache, however way you pronounce it. It's both are correct, but cached or cache or cached information. I don't know. Okay, so how about you, Nicole? Do you know what caching is or cached pages? First of all, have you ever, any one of you clicked on this type of arrow that shows up in your search results? In each of the snippets, you can find that there is a pointing downwards, a small arrow icon. When you click on it, says cached or similar. Occasionally, it just says cached, and sometimes it says it gives you both option cached or similar. Um, okay, so let's just look at some of the search results and see where it shows up. Okay, where is it? Cached, cached, cached. Some of them show up something that says similar also, but not all the time. But we will look at both the terms. See, in this one it says cached and similar. So this is the option that actually now appears next to a URL. It is this arrow. The concept of cached or cache is that the search engine obviously is not going to be able to do an instant search into the main indexes and bring those pages all the way from data centers by doing some sort of time consuming effort to do that search. So what they do is normally they capture those pages that they have in their index or repository, and certain pages which they think are important or frequently are searched, they're going to put it in the temporary memory or somewhere in its a secondary index, or you could say the type of index which contains pages frequently accessed, and therefore easy for the search to return, and obviously to match it with your search terms. It may not have to go too deep into rest of the pages that may remain in the centralized repository. So cached pages, number one, is the ones that are commonly accessed are temporarily placed somewhere so it can be quickly accessed. Second reason for caching the pages is to keep the identity of those web pages that may be that may have a link, a broken link later on, or maybe the domain just vanished, or for legal reasons those pages needs to be kept as evidence, especially in digital evidence collection, so that they are not going to disappear totally from something that appears to be part of the litigation, especially where the evidence needs to be captured and presented. So for someone to go back and find those pages again, they may have to access the cached version of that page, which may otherwise may not be actively published or is not active on the internet. How many of you know about archives.com or waybackmachine.com? Do you know anything about that website? No. Okay. So there is a website which is now somewhat become a standard for looking up certain web pages that disappeared or that used to be a long time ago, as a historical record or archives of those pages maintained in a centralized location of a website called Wayback Machine or archives.com. Just to show you what it is. Now, supposing we had, I remember we had another software company. It was called Be Vocalized long time ago. So supposing that website is no longer there, the domain is lost, but some of the content pages that I might require for evidences or for litigations or for any other reason, I would look for cached record of those pages. Google may or may not have it. It just depends on whether or not that's been cached by Google as an important link or frequently accessed link that sort of remains in its temporary custody. But definitely there is an organization that whose only job is to capture all the web pages that belong to a single domain based on on the frequency of how much time it takes to collect the entire or skim through the entire domain links that exist today. So it may just have cached a few pages or more than a few pages of a domain at a certain date and time, and then it may return to it back again after maybe 6 months, 8 months, depending on how long it takes for it to go around and complete that full circle of going through those different web pages and collecting those information. It gets returned back to the same domain again looks for that information in as of that date and captures it. So I think it's called what is it called I think it's called archives.org if I'm not wrong. I'm showing you this website so that you let's call it Wayback Machine. Sorry, excuse me. It's called archive.org. So supposing there was a cached page which I require, something that had a domain name called, which I'm going to search right here, HTTP used to be called bevocalized.com, something I had working until I think 2001. So if I click on browse history on this website, I'm going to find the I'm going to find the history of the cached pages as an example. So I know that the domain existed in 2008, 2009, 2010 somewhere. So the pages that were captured are showing different days of that year or different month of that year. And when I click on these bars, vertical bars, I could see the remnants of those cached pages. So let's just look at 2013, and there are two dates in 2013 or 2 months somewhere. So I'm going to click here and see what comes out. What's happening? Okay. In 2012, in the month of February, on the fourth day of February 2012, there was one snapshot captured and cached. On April 2018, there was another shot that was captured, and you can see these two vertical bars in 2012 indicates two captures, one in the month of February and the other bar is for April. And if I click on any one of these, so let's say if I click on this one, I could see the cached version of my website. This is what used to be there, and it is no longer available. So if you're going to look for it, it's because we sold this company long time ago. However, for the reason of just checking back on certain things, pieces of information, even as evidence, I would be able to collect it from here. Google may not even have this link anymore. So if I do bevocalize.com, it may not have these pages. It can't be reached, but I can find it in archive.com. So this is another way that you can retrieve the cached version. When the search is showing you these links, it is basically bringing you cached pages, so that they are available readily and they can be accessed quickly. And therefore, most of what is presented and brought back to you is bunch of cached pages that resides in the data centers in closest vicinity in your area or around your area, even in that zip code or provinces, depending on where the data center is. It's going to start to collect cached pages and deliver those first. So the search engine, besides the relevancy part in for the type of information you require, also pays a lot of or gives a lot of weight to whatever is available as cached pieces of information. So it is a sort of an implied or sort of a kind of something that is decided by the search engine as well as part of its ranking algorithms of which pages are to be cached. Second way of figuring out where you have another option to select, and here when you are getting something that says cached as a single option, it means that by default these are cached pages. But if you get another option in some of these snippets in your while you're clicking on the downward arrow that says similar, it has an other meaning which is not exactly linked or is directly is not does not have a direct relationship to cached pages. What similar means is simply for the search to find pages or the snippets that belong to a domain name which has a similar type of goods or services, or which is coming from the same type of keywords, or the information pages in there are similar based on what it represents. Like in the case when you are looking for news, for instance. So if I do cnn.com is what I am getting a link back, or I'm getting the snippet that is pointing to the cnn.com website, and I choose to select similar, it would mean that I would get information or some of those words that are being searched in connection with the site, which also is a news site. So MSNBC, or same wordings or same title of news that belongs to any sort of a news agency. When I have chosen to find results in a similar way, would show up, and it would not be coming from any third party platform, anything which is not a news agency or something that is of different type of business, or the nature of business is different. And this similar works for large websites in relationship to the well known websites, not for small companies that are doing e-commerce business, but more, as I mentioned, like news agency as an example. So this is where similar and cached concepts are to be applied. Like I said, cached you don't have to worry about much, but the what cached would do if you choose select cache is it would find more information of the same, different variants of the same domain, same type of web pages that uses same wordings. But similar would mean it's not within the same domain name, but similar type of business. As I said, gave you an example of news agency. So if all this is clear, then we can now finish up this topic, which we were doing on how to interpret and read the SERPs, search engine result pages. Now we will go back to advanced search queries. Where does it start from? Let's get back to it from the top of what these advanced search operators are. We had started that topic beautifully, but somehow I took you to the. In any case, that is also part of your lessons. So it's not we're doing anything different from what is laid out in your syllabus, except that I thought learning SERPs was probably a better thing to do before we get to the advanced operators. Now coming back to it, this is the slide we were working on. initially. So snippets, as I mentioned, and we did different variations of snippet already. Now to see how the search, uh, advanced search operators work on the web pages. So snippets has three elements. There is a title part which we can query, the description and the URL. In the title part, you can see that we have two different advanced operator. One is called in title and the other one is called all in title. In title means that the search is going to be now restricted or rather specified to look for the type of words that you've put in inside of the title part, or your title in the snippet that gets written must have those wordings in it. So your search words, keywords, or search phrases that belong to the title or which are to be queried inside of a title can be can be can be put in building search queries specific to the title part. In text, same concept as title, you except that in text means that you want the descriptive part or the textual part that is different layers of content inside of a web page in different paragraphs or in different sequence, different compartments of that web page, which is basically textual in nature, are going to be queried. So it is a deeper query that you can do with in text colon, and this is besides the title part. The title is short number of words. It The title specifies what or identifies with what the rest of the page would be comprised of, or identifies the topic, or at least gives a heading which is captured and presented in the snippet. That is short, yet it is meaningful enough that gives you an idea of what the page is about. So, in title, usually a limited number of words, yet power words, the kind of words that would define the rest of the page of what it means, and the topic is identified. This is where the in title is an important type of search, advanced search operator. All in title we'll do in a little bit, but let's get the concept clear where they get applied first. And then we will do things like all in title, all in text, and all in URL. Differentiate between why they are different when we put an additional word all in it. So for now, let's assume in title is something that we just discussed. In text is the description part. As I mentioned, in URL, it's obvious that it is going to be querying that part of those web pages that are captured and archived, which has the links in it, links that has words which match your search query words or the keywords you have used in your query. So they are going to be matched inside of the words that are used within the URL. Now URL has a different, it has a stem, we call it a stem, or we call it the structure of a URL. That structure in itself is a lengthy piece of information. It can be short, but usually it's lengthier when you have a very large website and there are so many different folders and subfolders, which eventually gives you a path to the title of the page or the name of the web page that is indicated by the information or the text that falls after the last backslash in the stem of that URL. So that those words or even subfolders, anything that is named inside of a URL is considered as one word or group of words together that are queried specifically by using in URL. File types, and this is the today we are getting introduced to these advanced operators and to get an understanding of what they do basically fundamentally, but not that we are going to do their application today. We'll start with that on Monday. Today we not only do the intro, but we would also learn the structure, what it means to have a name that is specific and which cannot be changed. Like in title cannot be entitled or it cannot be on title. So it is specific. The colon, what that means, and whatever comes after that, and the type of information that comes after the colon, how is that structure and what that means. These are the elements we'll be discussing in today's lecture. So its use and its application would be done on Monday, when we start next week. Now, format is another heading, which means that there are specific type of advanced operators such as file type with the colon, that allows you to find a specific or different type of formats in which the information pages are captured. The HTML is the type, also a type of format, which is the universal language or the universal format in which the web pages appear in front of you. So any website that you open up and you see the content like text, even the headings, everything that lies on it in in different sections or different areas of that one web page, that is all prepared in the HTML form, or the type of extension or the type of format that you would find in the link at the top on the address bar when you open up the website, would have an extension that says .htm or .html, which means the same thing. And in the sense of what the format is called, it is purely HTML format. Then the other format in which you can access information, which the search engine archives, defines, separates, and interprets, converts it into textual part, is information on PDF formats. The all the usually the Microsoft Office formats are also the types that are archived, separated, indexed, and identified with what the textual or whatever the title of that document represents. And therefore we can say that XLS, for instance, PowerPoint, docx or doc files and similar are identified and archived, and basically can be searched specifically to the type of format they exist in on the index pages. So we are going to use file type colon and defined the format. That means we could do file type colon and PDF. We can do file type colon XLS and similar, which is actually the type of formats that are specifically identified along with the list of rest of these extension that the search engine would give you an option to search with the file type colon operator. So besides and beyond this, in your book you will find that there are like 20 or more than 20 different formats that exist, which we don't know of or which we normally don't use unless we are using certain type of application softwares, more so to do with, let's say, Google Earth or Google satellite search or maps, and they all have different formats in which for which you may want to do specific queries by applying those formats, which generally we don't know of. So therefore it is important, in order for you to take the maximum leverage and to take the maximum advantage of what is available, you recognize it and you get to know it by learning it through the list in the book, as I mentioned. And some of the journalists, for example, they used WKF format to find satellite images. To do that kind of search, they know that format for the reason of their profession or their work. But being a researcher, if you know those formats and the knowing that type of information that exists in that format, like 3D imaging, you can find that information by looking at some of the extension. .swf used to be there. Now it is no longer searched for the reason that I think Adobe got acquired or something happened. The technology part sort of did not work well with Google, so that got eliminated. So that format that the Google would like you to search with may change from time to time. However, we are more focused on PDF, XLS, Doc, more everything that has to do with Microsoft Office, which is more important for us. And we would also learn the type of information which normally is very specific to the type of information in which you would find it. Like if it is a data of some sort, especially raw data, population, statistics, things like that, you would be able to probe it and find pages in XLS format. So you would do like population consensus, then you would write file type colon XLS. More than likely, you will find exactly what you require. In comparison, if you don't use file type, you just do population data, you might get it in certain formats in which you cannot transfer information. It may be more secure. It may not have the columns and rows that makes it easy for you to capture that data and transfer it. So all sorts of reasons and all sorts of justifications for using specific type of formats, depending on what you're looking for. Research papers, I would be more specific to apply and identify that with the PDF format, and so on. And then we have another type of advanced search operators that actually capture the source information, or it captures information of the sort that sort of brings us or leads us to the type of source that we identify with or we specifically point to for the search to find information related to that. So one of the three that we will look at as an example, and then we'll do the rest later on. This is just going to be just giving you a general understanding. We are not going specific. So the source, as I said, one of the advanced operators in finding sources is called related with the colon sign. Related with the colon has about more or less the same function as you would want to expect from. Remember, we did cache and we did similar. So what similar does is somewhat or exactly, I would say almost exactly like related colon. And I wouldn't be surprised if related colon is the advanced operator that works behind the similar option. Then source with the colon means that any source that tracks or traces it back to the earliest date in which that piece of information got uploaded, or any of the sources of information that belongs to a particular domain, yet the source is going to identify that piece of information to articles, to multimedia, or anything or everything that is pointing or is including that source as an incoming link or as a forwarding link or a link that exists on a third party platform, yet it is pointing to your website or to your domain. That means that the source colon would capture the entire set of information that it finds, or everything that has to do with domain uh, mentioned anywhere on the internet which the Google has information for will be captured. Link with the colon sign means that it is going to capture any link or all links that exist for that particular domain name. So the source basically is scraping all sorts of information that belongs to your website or to with the related with your competitors. The domains, the site colon, we have used on few occasions when we were doing some examples earlier. So the domain that needs to be specified, or where your search query, in spite of having all different operators and different keywords, if it is a query that alongside the site with the colon sign and domain defined is executed, it's going to restrict all those searches and all those variations of the way you have designed that search with booleans and everything else we did is going to be held inside of that domain, or the links that will be queried will remain specific for searching into those pages that are attached to that particular domain name, which is more like a restrictor. Date range we learned also while we were doing some other queries, before and after ranges. It could be a range, meaning that these two can be placed alongside in the same query, in the same, you could say, we also call it a query string. Query string means the entire length of the query, inclusive of keywords and your search operator. So the query string, a single query string, would be able to have both of these date ranges, like before colon and after colon, which is to say that any dates that you're going to put in against or right next to the colon would create some sort of a minimum range or a maximum range, or something that says starts with or gives it a date range between two sets of dates. So before and after can work one next to another, and they can also operate separately as individual advanced operator that can be restrained, or can also restrict your search to a certain year, not necessarily to put a date, precise date in it. You could do before colon and just put the year in it, but you cannot do a month. But supposing if you have to just do the year, you can do before 2020, you can also do after 2019. Either one of them would work in a single way without creating a range. The other way that you can do certain things is to be more precise, give it a day and the month, but you cannot put a year and a day alone, or any combination of the three without completing the entire three sets of information of a year, month, and a day. So, unless you have all these three elements together, don't put two of them in one of these, or again or after the colon sign. We will do it as we learn with the practice, that certain things work and others don't, like do's and don'ts of it. But one of the don'ts is that you cannot just put a year and not put a day, or just put a year and not put a month. You just have to either have, you have two options. One is to put the year against it, or put the entire date, which includes day and the month, alongside the year, so that the the way the date is written, first of all, is standardized and placed with the year first, followed by the month and the day. So the format is important, presence of the year alongside the two other elements of including day and the month has to be there. You cannot, so I don't want to keep repeating, sometimes I keep repeating the same thing. I apologize, and I don't realize it. Anyway, so you get the sense of what I'm talking about. Date range with a colon sign used to be an operator that no longer works, or it is extremely flaky. It used to be there and used to cover what or do exactly what before and after is doing now. So before colon and after colon is a new version, or a new type of advanced operator introduced by Google, whereas date range with the colon sign is no longer applicable. One of the drawbacks was with the date range used to be that you had to use a Julian calendar to mention the date, and that meant that you have to first convert it into a Julian calendar, and that sort of had a lot of digits in it, and occasionally with one wrong one, the precision, or it used to not work because there was an error in numbers. So it just sort of, it didn't work that well anyways. Before and after works fantastic. Cache, we don't use it anymore because it is assumed that cache exists already now with the options search is giving on snippets, where you can click on cache, or not. Even if you don't, then by default you can assume that those pages that are shown there in snippet are cache pages actually, 99% of them. Image search we don't not need to do anymore because it has now given a lot of flexibility where you can select image sizes and so on. Proximity we did the other day, along uh, with the wildcards. So we've covered that. Next, we have to do the structure of how the file format, or typically what it means when you are using the two. you're using the colon and
I have a
what it.
quick question for
Yes, go
you.
ahead.
On the date range, when I did the questions in the workbook, that was one of the questions, and it talked about the Julian date. Would that be on the exam
No,
since it's
unfortunately
in the?
not. I'll give you a tip though. I mean, this is the secret of you passing the exam, and for you not to really exhaust yourself with the workbook, because see what happens with the workbook is that sometimes there are few versions of the main training guide that came up past few years, especially during 2019. There weren't a lot of changes made to training guide, um, and some of the information in there did get updated, but the workbook side of it, which is actually something that is authored by another group. We have certain committees and certain number of people, they specifically work on the course in a way that their authority, first of all, they don't overlap each other. Second, for segregation of duties, so that the integrity of examination remains intact. So that group is separated from the group that creates the training, and then the other group actually creates the exam and works on the workbook. And occasionally, because of the coordination, a lack of coordination, or some communication issues, or for whatever reason, because these are two groups, occasionally we find the conflict within conflict in how the questions are prepared, and how the training guide is has changed few of its elements, and you could say that some of the information gets updated there, but it's not updated in the workbook. So what I did with similar, and I'm glad, Tammy, that you are, really applying yourself to the fullest with attempting all those questions, and you're keeping an eye and being very watchful about correlating it with the book, with whatever you're answering in your workbook. But I will, I'll be honest with you, because these are some of the issues, but not a whole lot, just because they were these minor discrepancies, and we didn't get around to work on it, only because of third reason, which is where we are already getting ready to print the 5.0 version. So we didn't think after a certain point, when 5.2 5.0 is coming up soon, we didn't pay a lot of attention in correcting the previous ones. So this, all of this together came out to be sort of an issue, but it wasn't anything major, as you may have noticed. So what we did is, instead of updating the workbook and trying giving extra effort to make it work with the 4.0, since we are creating 5.0, we are creating totally new sets of questions, and a new way of writing the workbook. In fact, what we might end up doing, and which is what we are debating right now, is for the 5.0 version, we would rather put the Q and A's in the smaller booklets. The booklets that, I don't know if I showed you, the new version would have these similar booklets, which one of the basic search queries that we created would be something similar to this, and the collection of these booklets would make the training guide, so that we can make it more granular, make it more segregated and separated, because the course is becoming large, and controlling some of the, or the quality control may be difficult. So we started to give or allocate the assignments to work on smaller booklets, so that we are more focused, and then within that we would also have a section that gives Q and A's. So there is no coordination problems, or there is no correlational issues. Everything is going to be precisely related to whatever is in the topics or covered in that booklet. So to give you an idea that you are actually joining us or coming into giving or taking the classes at a point when we are actually in the process of now moving on and transitioning to 5.0 for 2021. However, for the exams that you're going to give and anything that you can expect to come in your final exams of CIRS, I would want you to focus on practicing the Q&As inside of the practice exams which I've given you. Now, if you do
Right.
that instead of working on the workbook, what will happen is that you will increase your likelihood of passing the exam. You will cut down on time, avoid some of the issues that you just bought in, like date range, for instance, got retired, probably still exist in the main book or not, I don't know. But to get rid of all those ambiguities and to really focus on passing the exam, considering that what you got or the practice exam you got is somewhat similar to what you can expect. And besides, it covers most of the main ideas or the concepts that we want you to be proficient on. So, in order for you to become CIRS, something which we feel that we have to deliver and with a complete understanding is covered in those questions. So you wouldn't be missing much, except that I would, and this is the reason I gave you these practice questions. If you are going to go and do the exams and find yourself passing the exams with 80% or 85% correct answers, I know for a fact that better than going through the workbook, you would have a lot better chance to pass your exams if you go the way I'm directing you. However, the advantage of going through the workbook is that you will be really very thorough, except that you will have to spend more time. There's more sets of questions. There's like 500 some questions there. So your time of going through those questions and through the workbook versus the number of questions you have to cover in your practice exams is going to reduce your burden by half, because I believe you have like 280 some questions in the practice exam versus in the workbook, which may have like 560 or close to 600 questions in there. So this is the
Okay.
only difference. And then when you pass the exam, one objective is achieved, then you can go back and brush up on your concepts and go through the workbook, do stuff that you wanted to. But at least one objective is cleared up. Your CIRS exam is passed. And so, you can, at your own time and pace, you can then work on the workbook. So, having said this, and this is again a suggestion, I'm not saying that workbook is redundant. I'm just saying, as I said, as I mentioned, it's a choice. So, thank you. I think we'll just hold on to this concept because this would take you into a zone that requires for me to consistently go through at least 9 slides to maintain the flow and the rhythm. So I'd rather start this slide from Monday. And as I said, I will try to round up. In fact, not try, and I'll make it a point. I give you these slides that has additional pieces of information. Collectively, there would be more slides than you got, and the numbering or the page numbers would obviously become different. So you would have to let go or retire the previous version and just use the new one. Monday you shall have that, and I'll see if I can finish up the notes for advanced search operators. And thank you so much. You stay safe, take care of yourselves.